this is a bit of a recycled title here. Lions, vultures, and gazelles, oh my, a jaunt through Arabian skies. So I'm going to take you through some of the prominent star groupings of the springtime sky in Arabia. But first, let me just share a little bit about how I got into this and whatnot. My focus of study is cultural astronomy, and you can get into that through astronomy or through social science, anthropology. And it's the second route that I took. I got my first telescope when I was 7 and started observing the sky ever since. So I was an amateur astronomer for quite a long time. And then I studied theology and then cultural anthropology. That got me into Arabic. And when I was living in Beirut, Lebanon, studying Arabic literature, I came upon this treasure of all kinds of works about Arabian astronomy. And, this is present in kind of a historical, or you might even say anthropological works, more than 1,000 years old, writing about astronomy among the Arabs, but also from their poetry directly, from pre-Islamic times, 1,500 years ago. So this all just kind of mashed together and created my epiphany moment where all of these different elements of my life just smashed together in this wonderful mess called cultural astronomy. And I've been going down that road ever since. So we're going to look at, a piece of Arabian astronomy. And, first I have to unpack what I mean by Arabian astronomy. A lot of people think that is Islamic astronomy. It's not. It's a very completely different things. When I say Arabian astronomy, I'm talking about indigenous Arabian astronomy that was present before the development of Islam, before the introduction of Indian and Greek astronomies to the region. So tonight, when we look at our night skies, we've got, whoops, my slide needs help advancing here. There we go. When we look at the night sky, we've got all of these beautiful stars. And over time, we've developed many different names for them. Most of these names, as you all probably know, are derived from Arabic that we use today. Some of those are Arabic descriptions of Greek astronomy, but others are Arabic descriptions of indigenous Arabian astronomy. So we're going to look at some of those differences tonight. I should probably also mention that I serve in the International Astronomical Union on the working group on star names, where we talk about the official names for the stars used by professional astronomers. That is a helpful piece for professional astronomers to make sure they're all talking about the same star. But there is also a problem in that it flattens the sky. So there are many stars that have many different names contributed by many different cultures. And when you choose only one, it really does kind of flatten all of that beautiful diversity that we have in the sky. We have these star names. We connect stars with constellations like this. These, of course, are the Greek constellations. I'm going to be using terms like celestial complex tonight because Arabs had some connect the dot constellations like you see here, but more often they were scenes in the sky where stars represent individuals. And so they're clustered together around a campfire or, some other scene. And so it's a bit more complex or sometimes simpler than these kind of stick figure constellations of Greek astronomy. And then, of course, in modern times, we chop everything up. So a constellation is no longer what you see, but the area of space that what you see takes up. And that's a very modern concept of a constellation. So what I'm going to do tonight is take this very flattened view of the night sky and separate it out into its multiple layers of Arabian astronomy. And we'll focus on what we can see tonight. So this is the sky as we'll see it later tonight. Got the beautiful Milky Way coming through and, everything from Orion to Canis Major and Gemini, etc. But we're going to leave those names behind. So the first thing I'd like to show is this very bright star Sirius was known as the Shara who crossed over. In Arabic, Ashara el-Abur. Shara is this name. So it's a very old name. There were two sisters named Shara that we'll learn about here. So this one is the one who crossed over. And this one here, which you know as Procyon, was the one who was bleary-eyed. So what's going on here? Well, there was a very, very old story. And in this story, we also have some other characters. So I'm going to drop the horizon here so we can see the second brightest star in the night sky, which is not impossible to see from Flagstaff, but really, really difficult. Canopus. In this story, this is known as Suhail. Suhail is a male figure. He is the brother. He is the brother of the two Shara sisters, and he is engaged to El Josat. And we'll talk more about El Josat in a little bit. But basically, she started out as the three stars in the belt of Orion. And the story goes that Suhail was engaged to El Josat. And then on their wedding night, something terrible happened. There are variations of the story, but in all the versions, by dawn, El Josat is dead. So Suhail fears for his life because the family of El Josat is going to get him and go after him. And so he flees to the south. Now, his two sisters do different things. The Shara who crossed over crosses over the river, which is the Milky Way here, to be closer to her brother, Suhail. The little bleary-eyed Shara stays at home in their ancestral home. And so she cries and cries because she's lost her brother, but also now her sister. And so she's bleary-eyed because she keeps crying. Now, a really interesting thing about this story is that, in fact, Ashera el-Abur, the one who crossed over, actually did cross over the Milky Way. Due to proper motion, Sirius moved from this side of the Milky Way to where it is now over the past 50,000 years. It really did cross over. That's not to say this legend has to be 50,000 years old. It could be 5,000 years old and just have imagined that it was at the end of crossing over. But still, it's a pretty neat thing, and it's a great way to introduce the concept of proper motion. So we'll go back to the sky here and zoom in on, hello? Oh, yeah, sorry. Before we zoom in, there's some interesting curiosities about Arabian astronomy. And here's a fun one. So this word, Mirzim, means the bringer forth. And there are 3 different stars that were known as Mirzim. So this one is the bringer forth of the Shi'ara who crossed over. And excuse me. And today the star is still called Mirzim. And then here we have the bringer forth of the Shi'ara who was bleary-eyed. And then we have the bringer forth of El-Jawzat. So only in this area of sky do we have these stars called Mirzim. And they always rise. They're like heralds that rise ahead of another bright star. Okay, so now we're going to zoom in on El-Jawzat. I like talking about El-Jawzat because I get to give back to her the things that Orion stole. So initially, El-Jawzat was likely just the 3 belt stars that we know as the belt of Orion. In Arabic, El-Jawzat means something in the middle. And so presumably it spoke of this bright star in the middle of the belt stars. The belt of Orion, of course, is almost perfectly equidistant and lined up, just highly symmetrical. But then there are other symmetries. So we can take one of the upper stars and the lower stars, and then also on the other side, and we have these really nice symmetries in Orion. So this notion of being in the middle is really exemplified by this group of stars. So over time, many of these stars that start as individual stars or very small groups develop other things as the stories grow over time. So El-Jawzat got 2 hands and 2 feet. So the foot is Rijal El-Jawzat, which is where we get the word Rigel from. This is not Orion's foot. It is the foot of El-Jawzat that Orion stole. The hand of El-Jawzat is Yed El-Jawzat. Over time, one of the dots here got misplaced. So Yed El-Jawzat became Bed El-Jawzat. When that got transliterated into Latin, it ended up as Betelgeuse, Betelgeuse. So this is not the hand of Orion. It is literally the hand of El-Jawzat. It's in the name Betelgeuse. And then the 3 stars we have here, in Arabic, they all come from words like a navam, which means the belt of pearls or the organized row, a nitaq, which means the belt. And so we have al-nitaq, which comes directly from that, al-nilam, which is slightly altered from a navam, and then mintaqa is another variation on al-nitaq. So each of the 3 names for the belt stars are talking about the belt of pearls that El-Jawzat wore, not Orion's belt. So there were other elements over time that were added here. So here we have the head of El-Jawzat. It's a group of 3 stars close together. Here we have an arc of stars, which you might see as the bow of Orion, but for El-Jawzat, they were her flowing locks of hair, of the wa'ab. And then on the other side, she also has a bow, It's bigger than Orion's bow. And it goes up into the stars of what we would see as Gemini, right here and over here, and down into Monoceros. And then Al-Jawzat has 2 footstools, the front footstool and the rear footstool. So possibly this is conferring some royalty upon her, but we don't really know that much about her story. And then here in Canis Major, we've got the maidenhead. The star in the center is orange. And so it's the maidenhead of Al-Jawzat, speaking of her virginity or the breaking of her virginity. So this is a lot here. And and I should mention 3 of the stars here, Al-Zara, Al-Dhara, and Al-Udra, are all coming from one word, actually, Al-Udra in Arabic, which means the maidenhead. So there's a lot of rich imagery going on here in the night sky. There are a lot of modern star names that speak back to this. And Al-Jawzat now has her stars back. So nearby, of course, we've got a star that probably you all know well, Debaran, which in Arabic is a Debaran, the follower. Who is a Debaran following? We'll find out. Debaran is following this cluster of stars, which I'm sure you'll recognize as the Pleiades. In Arabic, this was called Asuraya. And Asuraya means moisture and abundance. There are 2 different roots that connect here, but it's the diminutive form of the word. So it would be translated something like the little abundant one. And there's some significance in that when Asuraya was setting in the west, just ahead of the sunrise, that was a period of intense rains. And so the rains literally marked the ground with moisture, and then the green plants that sprouted up marked it with color. So there's a lot of significance we see for Asuraya, so much that over time, when you read the poetry, and if it just says the star, it's talking about Asuraya. It was so prominent that, kind of like when you say, I'm going to town, we know that's Flagstaff because that's, where we live, or Tucson. So when we say the star back in Arabia, this pointed to Asuraya. Now, Debaran is the follower of Asuraya. Debaran had some other names. Tali Anejim means the follower of the star, Hadi Anejim means the urger of the star, so someone who's driving the star forward. There was another name that Debaran had, and that was Al-Mijdah, the stirrer up of rain. And this appears in some of the conversations around a passage in the Quran as well. So, of course, Debaran is really close to Asuraya. So if it was raining intensely at the dawn setting of Asuraya, it also was doing so when Debaran set. So we're going to zoom in on Asuraya. Again, we have the follower, Debaran. But then I'm going to introduce another star. This is El-Aryuk, the impeder, or the preventer. This you'll recognize as Capella in the Greek constellation Orion. So this formed another love triangle. Debaran was engaged to Asuraya, but El-Aryuk prevented the two of them from getting together. And so in the night sky, El-Aryuk rises first and then watches over Asuraya all through the night and prevents the two of them from getting together. Now, Asuraya was so prominent, of course, she also gained other parts over time. So she has here two hands or arms. One is the amputated hand, a kef el-jethmet. And it's called this because there are a few stars here that later on were kind of added with fingers. But overall, there's not very many bright stars here. And it's shorter than the other hand, as we'll see. And then we have this star here, Kef el-Jethmet, which comes from this old name. The other one is the henna-dyed hand, el-Kef el-Khadib. And this name came in part because we have a star here almost at the end that is very orange in Greek Cassiopeia, and that evokes the color of henna. The end star, which is not orange, is today called Kef in recognition of the star pattern. And then if we zoom in further, there are actually many articulated parts of this henna-dyed hand. One of my favorite is the tattoo on the wrist of the henna-dyed hand. So the famous double star cluster in Perseus, NGC 869 and 884, is visible to the naked eye as a fuzzy splotch. And that was seen to be the tattoo on the wrist of Asuraya. Another notable part is the elbow here, El Mirfak, and that star name survives as Mirfak in Greek Perseus. And there were many other parts articulated throughout this arm. There was the upper arm, there was the pit of the elbow, the tip of the elbow, the upper arm, the shoulder, and the shoulder blade, all named stars. So we're going to move over a bit and look to the north. And of course, we've got the pole star. And we're going to take a look at some motion here. So if we project the celestial sphere into the north sky, we'll see the, the pole. And then if we move time, every tick here is 100 years. We're going backwards to about 600 CE. At this period of time, when a lot of this Arabian astronomy was being developed, there was no North Star due to precession of the equinoxes. Instead, the North Celestial Pole was almost equidistant between two stars in our modern day Little Dipper. So these stars were the Goat Kid, which is our current North Star. In Arabic, that was El Jedi. And the other was actually a pair of stars, the two wild cow calves, Al Farqadan. And one of those names, Farqad, survives today in our Little Dipper. So let's take a look and watch how the night sky moves when we don't have a pole star. And so here we've got this star, our current North Star, that's actually moving quite a bit through the night here. This arc of stars that makes up the current Little Dipper and a fainter arc on the other side together created the protuberance, al-Fats. And in Arabic, this pointed to the axis of a millstone upon which the upper part of the millstone turned. And so there's a little bit of a bulge there to keep these two stones aligned. And so that was imagined to be here in the night sky as well. So we've got the goat kid, the two wild cow calves, and the protuberance, all here in the northern sky. If we go further, I'm sure you see our familiar Big Dipper up here. And in Arabia, this was known as the children of the beer. So the beer is the group of 4 stars here. And here the beer is not something you drink. The beer is what you lay a deceased person on to carry them to the funeral site or the burial site. And then the 3 stars in the handle of the dipper were the children of the beer. So altogether, the group was called Banat Nash al-Kubra, the children of the larger beer. There was also Banat Nash Asuraya, the children of the smaller beer. They recognized the similar pattern in our little dipper here. Amid the handle stars, they also had their own names. And so this first one here, or the one I guess closest to the beer, was called the black camel or horse, al-Jaunt. The middle one was called the she kid, al-Anaq. And the one on the end was called al-Qa'id, the leader of horses or camels. And today it still retains that name as al-Qaid. Now, there's another named star here that's a great favorite of mine, the overlooked one. And it is this star very close to al-Anaq. And this star has, across time and across cultures, been used as a test of eyesight for different people. And so in Arabia, there was this saying that said, I show her the overlooked one, and she shows me the moon. We don't know much more about this. Appears to have been used between lovers. But that's how the overlooked one plays into the culture here. Now, I can't talk about Arabian astronomy without showing you an actual camel. And so there's an actual camel in the night sky. And Bonnie, you've seen this in the real sky last fall during the star party. Can anyone find a camel here? Kind of hard to pick out. But there it is, the she camel, Anaka. And so this is using some of the stars of Greek Cassiopeia. And then this is heading into Pegasus. But there's actually a string of faint stars that perfectly create this camel's neck. And then we've got the hump and 2 legs. So an actual camel in the night sky. This is a very, very old star grouping that may have some origins going back towards Babylonian times. And then I'll also note that, excuse me, that here we're also going to look at some really fun pair of stars. The flying vulture. This in Arabic is a Nasr al-Ta'ir, and from that we get our name Altair. And then we have another group that was known as the lighting vulture, a Nasr al-Waqi'a. And al-Waqi'a was Latinized as Vega. And so Altair and Vega are actually indigenous Arabian star names. These are the 2 vultures, and they're called this because this one here has a smaller star on either side, as if it's flying through the night. So it's the flying vulture. And here next to Vega, we have 2 small stars that form a V. And so it looks like, not in this position here, but as it's setting in the west, it looks like a vulture that has its wings up as it's preparing to land on a surface. You'll see this translated as eagles, but the Arabic is properly vulture. And then we're going to wrap up with, I think, the most spectacular thing you can see in the spring sky. This will forever change your view of the night sky in spring. So let's get ready. This, no doubt, you recognize as Leo, the lion from Greek astronomy. The Arabs also had a lion, a lot bigger. This is the Arabian lion, El Asad. This is a monster. It took up 135 angular degrees of night sky, from Greek Gemini and Canis Minor all the way over to Bootes and Virgo. And there are many parts identified here. We've got the extended forearm with claws that reach out, the clenched forearm that's grasping something. One of my favorite parts actually is the sneeze of the lion. There are two small stars here in Greek Cancer that were called the two nostrils. And the star cluster known today as M44, the beehive, is visible to the naked eye as a splotch. And that was the sneeze of the lion that the two nostrils had sneezed out. Beautiful detail in the lion. Over here, we have the rump. I don't know why it's not detached, but you know, these things happen apparently. And then up here, we have the liver, which also would seem like a fatal blow to this giant lion. This cluster, giant cluster of stars, known to the Greeks as Coma Berenices, is the tail hair of the lion, Hulbat al-Asad. And there's a fun story. So the lion was angry and thumped his tail on the ground, and that scared the gazelles away, and so they leapt away. And in the night sky, we can see the leaps of the gazelles as they leapt away. Ready? The first leap, the second leap, and the third leap. The leaps of the gazelles. In Arabic, this is qafazat adhibat, sorry. And today their star names survive as Al-Qafsa al-Ula, Al-Qafsa al-Thaniya, and Al-Qafsa al-Thalitha. And actually, in modern astronomy, these are Alula Borealis and Australis, because there's pairs of northern and southern stars. So those are the leaps of the gazelles as they ran away from the angry lion who thumped his tail hair. And then I'll end here with a final star right at the center of the lion, roughly. This star in the Greek lion is Denebola, which in Arabic comes from the tail of the lion, Dhanb al-Asad. But in Arabian astronomy, this was well known as the weather change, Asarfa. And it was called the weather change because when this star set before sunrise, it signaled the change from warm or cold weather to warmer weather. When it rose just ahead of sunrise, it signaled the change from warm weather to cooler weather. And so it was the weather change. It was also called the dog tooth of time, Nab ad-Dahr. And there's a saying that says, the weather change is the dog tooth of time, which bears smiling broadly. And that's because when the weather gets nice, like it is now, beautiful in Flagstaff, people are playing, they're having fun, they're smiling. And when you smile a lot, you show your canines. And so it's the dog tooth, the canine tooth of time, which it bears smiling broadly. So that's a little jaunt through the Arabian skies of spring. Happy to answer any questions.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much, Danielle. Yeah, anybody who has questions?
Something comes to my mind. Can you recommend, is there a good book that documents these stories and these histories that you could recommend to us? Or?
I am writing it.
No. There you go.
There's not a good book that documents these things. Excuse me. My dissertation that put this together was the first time that Arabian astronomy has been presented from its own context. Usually, where you find pieces of these stories is in other books, going back to the time of a Sufi who did the same thing. They go through the Greek constellations in the sky, and when they get to an Arabian star name, they say, oh, this means this, and it has to do with that. But you don't get that until you get to the other Greek constellation somewhere else in the book, in which that is located. So yeah, I'm trying to change that and create a work that really presents Arabian astronomy in its own context.
Any target publication date?
No. So I need to find a publisher, and my day job keeps me quite busy. I do get time to do research at Lowell, but we are hopping, and yeah, it is just going slow. I'm translating 1,500-year-old poetry and rhymed prose, and it's just archaic language and archaic grammar, and it goes slow. So a few years, I would say.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Danielle, this is about the third talk of yours I've heard, and they're all equally enjoyable. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
Thing is that my question is, when you look at many of the indigenous cultures, for example, in Australia and our own North and South American cultures, their views of the sky and the constellation often entailed origins. Is there such a thing in Arabian astronomy?
No, at least not that exists in the extant literature.
Yeah.
Even the stories, like I told the story of the two Shi'ara sisters and Suhail and El-Jawzat, that's really unusual to have an actual mythological story be preserved. Usually it's just scenes in the sky. We have this beautiful camel, or we have, Asuraya's arms with all her, identified parts.
Right.
And we don't have the stories that may have gone with those scenes in the sky.
Did you learn Arabic on the fly or take formal classes, language classes?
Both. I did a lot of years, I'm trying to count, a lot of years of formal Arabic study. By the point that I arrived in Beirut to study Arabic literature, I was taking graduate level Arabic literature classes that native Arabic speakers take, like we would take English lit classes. But it just, it's very difficult. It comes over a long period of time. So, a lot of people would consider me fluent. I know there's still a lot I don't know. So it's hard to use that term myself, but, I'm close, I would say.
And you write it too?
Yes. Yeah. When I was at the University of Arizona, I taught Arabic as part of my graduate program.
As a possible publisher, have you considered the University of Arizona Press?
Yes, I have. I've had great trouble getting any kind of responses from them. But yeah, they're in mind. I think my dream, my magnum opus would would be a tour through the whole Arabian sky. But what I'm doing is I'm starting out with a smaller piece that I think will work across many different audiences to start out with. So we'll see how it goes.
Good idea. Yeah.
Well, that's tremendous, Danielle. I really enjoy the pictures that you lay out of Arabian astronomy. And I would imagine that the language is, I think you might be skating over the complexity of it, because I'm not sure there is an Arabian, and particularly when you look at the span of time over which you've had to look at it. I'm sure that it has evolved. There's dialects from different areas. It must be enormously complex.
Yeah, it is complex. Dialects come into play just a little bit. What I'm reading is the formal classical Arabic. And so there was a high degree of standardization, not completely so, but pretty strongly. But yeah, it's old, and there's many ways to say the same things. So I know in the American civil service and military service, there are 4 levels of Arabic, or 4 levels of foreign language difficulty, and Arabic and Chinese are number 4, and there's no one else there.
I can believe that.
Yeah.